All right, you're going to talk to Lynn at the beginning, right?
Yes.
We are talking from the beginning, and I am Gabby, and we are here with Stir Crazy in the Kitchen. I'm chatting with Lynn Thielen, my buddy in crime here at Roth Living, and we're anxiously awaiting Chef's Ben recipe for today. Did you make it through Thanksgiving, Lynn?
Yes, I did. Yes, it was fantastic. And I'm excited for this Reuben soup that we're gonna cook up. I love Reubens. I really do. And so I'm curious and excited to see what Chef Ben's got for us.
Yeah, recipe today is Reuben soup. And I'm not a huge fan of Reubens, but when I looked at this recipe and I told two relatives what Ben was making today, they went wild. And I love soup. And here comes winner. Hey, Ben, you're the star. Good morning.
Good morning, Gabby. How are you this morning?
I'm chipper now. I really can hardly wait along with Lynn. So Stir Crazy in the Kitchen, Reuben soup. Lynn and I are just the fans, and Ben, it's your show.
All right. Well, thanks so much. No, Reuben's actually, unlike the two of you, perhaps. I mean, obviously Lynn likes Reuben's, but maybe you don't as much, Gabby. This is a version. It's sort of a play, obviously, on the Reuben sandwich, but it's also a play on a French onion soup. If you think about how a French onion soup is constructed, right? And how we toast some bread or some croutons, we put some cheese on it. We add, little embellishments here and there, herbs, things like that. But this is really a play on both of those items, the classic deli Reuben sandwich, and then a French onion soup. So it really is, it's quick to put together. It's not something that requires tons of simmering, even in a French onion soup where you're having to caramelize your own onions, and to do it correctly, it's a slow process. You don't want to cook the onions quickly. You want to get them beautiful and soft and sweet, but you want to give them that, so you need to give them some time. But in this case, we can throw a Reuben soup together pretty quickly. I think the most difficult part is putting together my version of a Thousand Island dressing, a lightened version of a Thousand Island dressing that's a little bit spiced up with a little bit of jalapeno as well to give it another little twist. So again, a little play on the idea of what goes into the parts of a Reuben soup. So pretty straightforward. As you can see, we have all the ingredients laid out. You just use some homemade beef broth, or if you don't have time to make your own homemade broth, just get some good quality store-bought beef broth. You could use a vegetable broth if you choose to, but then again, you're going to throw pastrami or corned beef in it, so it's not going to be vegetarian. So, but we want to make sure we've got that all set up. And so what we're going to do to start, let it give it a little bit of an infusion, is we're going to toast some caraway seeds. And obviously caraway seeds are the seeds you find in rye bread, and very closely associated with sort of Eastern European, Germanic style cooking. So that some of those flavor profiles that fit into what we're doing here. So we've just got a pot on the stove. We've got our caraway seeds. Just leave them whole. There's no reason to chop them.
Excuse me. We can get those in any of the seasoning.
Any seasoning spice department at your local
just so
supermarket.
People know. Right.
Yeah, just really easy. And then remember, with all your spices, it's always a really good idea to give them a little bit of a dry toast. Help bring out the oils, help bring out the flavor in your spices. So we've got the hot pan going. We're going to toast our caraway seeds, and you should smell them a little bit, right? Just a little aromatic at that point, and then you'll be good to go, right? So just give them.
There's nothing in the pan but the
just caraway seeds. It's just an empty pan. You don't need to add any oil or butter or anything like that. Just let it toast, right? Until when you lean over, it smells like, a toasting everything bagel, or maybe a little bit of a rye bread, which we'll get to here in a bit. And once you can smell it, you just take your beef broth, right, that you've got right here, and then keep your head back, don't lean right over, because it's going to be hot. And that's just going to steep like tea, right? So we're just going to infuse our broth with our caraway seeds. So at this point now, just bring it to a simmer. You don't have to put it over a really high flame, medium flame. Just let it get nice and hot. And then we're gonna move on to constructing the rest of our ingredients for this. And first thing that we have to construct is that Thousand Island dressing. Now, how do we make it a little bit lighter? How do we change that? Well, instead of using mayonnaise and things like that, we're just going to use some plain yogurt to start. So we've just got plain yogurt right here. We're just gonna add that to our bowl. So we all know what Thousand Island dressing tastes like, or some, like, as my
Well,
mother-in-law
that
used to
is
call it.
just such an, I hate to say old fashioned, but an old fashioned favorite.
Yeah, it's one of those
And
classics. And
yeah,
people don't like to admit that they like it because it's sort of one of
that's
those things.
exactly it. That was the only way I know to describe it.
Right? It's got that sort of old kind of cuisine sort of, thought. You would
It's
think
just
about it and think,
something
oh,
we grew up with.
right, exactly.
And
So here's what we're gonna add. We're gonna add some very finely minced onion, right? Because we need a little bit of onion in there, good for flavor. Then we're gonna add some lemon juice, a little bit of tomato paste, just for that color. It has to be that very light pink color, right? It wouldn't be Thousand Island dressing if it weren't. We're gonna add a little bit of vegetable oil to that. Now here's the fun stuff, right? We're always gonna have that, a little bit of sweet relish. If you don't want the sweet relish, you could use dill relish if you want.
okay, and that's something from our past.
That's right. But sweet relish really does make it Thousand Island, right? It gives it that flavor that we're familiar with. We like that sort of familiarity with it. Now let's spice it up with a little bit of dried mustard powder. And again, the hotter the mustard powder you use, the more assertive it's gonna be, right? Then you've got a little bit of sugar, just a little bit, about a teaspoon or so, some kosher salt, and last but not least, a little black pepper. And then here's where it kind of goes a little sideways from a traditional Thousand Island. We've got diced jalapeno peppers, right? So we've just taken a jalapeno, diced it up nice and fine. Add as much as you want. Obviously, the more you add, the spicier it will be. But we just want to add a bit of that and blend it all together.
Now, that is not something that the old fashioned relatives did.
No, it would not be something you would find in a traditional deli, on the East Coast, or even, Los Angeles, something like that. You're not going to find that in traditional Jewish deli for your Reuben salad sandwich. You're not going to find jalapenos in your Thousand Island dressing. But it's a little tangier because of the yogurt as well. Right? So
I love it, yeah.
So here's our Thousand Island, and it has the proper color. It's a little, it doesn't pour exactly like salad dressing, but that's not the idea. It's more of a spread at this point that we're going to use a little bit later. So you can see our broth is coming to a nice simmer. So we've got that going. So now let's put together those other pieces of the Reuben, right? You've got to have the rye bread, right? So we've got some nice German style rye here. It's a lighter style rye. Whatever rye bread you like, that's going to be just fine. You don't have to do a specific type one way or the other. You can just use whichever you want. And then we've got some melted butter. We're just going to brush each side with some melted butter. And you can do this in advance, right? This bread should actually be a little bit stale, would be ideal, right? Because you're going to dunk it in the soup. You're going to float it in the soup. So instead of doing that, I've just got a non-stick skillet here that I've got hot. I'm just going to toast the bread, right, on both sides. Just give it a little bit of color. All right, so while we're doing that, let's talk about the two really important ingredients in a Reuben, right? One is going to be whatever kind of meat you want to use. So I prefer pastrami. I like the flavor of pastrami. There's no it just has, I like that pepperiness that you get, that little smoky bit that you get with pastrami. But if you don't like pastrami, just use corned beef, right? You can use either one. Either one's going to be fine. What I've done is I've julienned it just like I would an onion in a French onion soup. I've just taken it, bought it at the deli at the market, and then just cut it into these long, thin strips, just like that. So you've got lots of beautifully julienne pastrami. Now, the sauerkraut. Some people might have gone so far as to make their own kraut. Maybe they do their own fermenting. you can do that, that's perfectly
Sure.
fine, or you can just purchase some sauerkraut at the market, right? So I've got some sauerkraut that I purchased at the store, I poured it into this bowl. I'm gonna drain it in a colander in the sink here, right? And this really does improve the quality of the sauerkraut. So I'm
This
draining
is
it.
plain jarred sauerkraut.
That's right. Nothing fancy, you can just get it at the market. All I'm doing is rinsing it with a little bit of cold water, gets off the excess amount of vinegar and the kind of acidic nature of it. Just gonna give it a shake. And then I'm gonna do it one more time. Just give it one more rinse. There we go. All right. So now that you've rinsed it a couple of times, you can put it back into your bowl. Got your sauerkraut. And this improves it just, I think, markedly. It's not as wet, right, in your soup. So we've got our sauerkraut, we've got our pastrami, we've got our broth getting nice and hot. Now we're toasting both sides of our rye bread. You can see how nicely that's just toasting just a little bit. I want to give it just a little bit more color. Now I've preheated a broiler in my oven, right? Just to melt the cheese, because obviously that's the last part of the Reuben is Swiss cheese, right? We want to work that in.
You preheated the broiler.
Preheated the broiler. Don't need it too hot. You're just going to melt some cheese. It's not like you're trying to cook anything. You're just trying to melt that cheese, right? So now that our bread is toasted just a little bit more, got my broiler pan here. Again, all of this can be done in advance. Do the bread in advance. Make the broth in advance. Obviously, you can make the Thousand Island dressing the day before. Keep it in your refrigerator without any trouble whatsoever. And
One of my questions was, how long will that, it's written on my notes.
the Thousand Island will last in your fridge nice and covered for about 5 days before you need to.
So I could cheat when I'm not eating it on the soup.
That's right. You can put it on
Okay.
a salad. You can serve it with your shrimp or whatever you'd like to serve it with. Make a little crab louis, right? So we're going to toast a couple more slices of rye bread here. And then, while that is toasting, let's just grab a spatula. We're going to have our two pieces over here that we've toasted. We're going to take a little bit of our Thousand Island dressing. We're going to put it in the middle. Just spread it out like you would if you were making a sandwich. And then we're going to top that with some cheese.
You have Swiss cheese on that.
That's just Swiss cheese, right? Now you can use fancy Swiss cheese if you want. You can get some Gruyere or Emmentaler or whatever. But you can, just normal everyday sliced Swiss cheese will save you a little time.
Well,
And
now I'm thinking onion soup with a twist.
it does have that to it, right? It has that little bit of that, let's melt something bubbly and all that good stuff on top of our soup, right? Give it that little bit of a
Melting cheese and bread on top of something is never a bad thing.
That's right.
That could be one of my favorite all-time go-tos.
So yeah,
Just
here's our other
melt-
two
Cheese and
Toasted.
bread.
slices of rye bread. All right. Here we go. More cheese. So now again, the broiler is nice and hot. We're going to pop this into the broiler. While that's just melting and toasting, let's get our bowls ready. So this is the easy way to.
It's 30 seconds.
It's not going to take that long to get it. Now, traditionally in a French onion soup, we've got a crock, we put the soup in it, we put everything on top, we throw the whole thing under the broiler and just melt it on top. For this, that doesn't work quite as easily, so I've got a little bit cheat method. You're going to add some of the pastrami.
Excuse me, is the cheese burning? It says 30 seconds.
No. But
Okay,
it's 30 seconds. better to check it too soon than check it too late. So, okay. You know, it's like,
This is what happens when you read a recipe.
That's right. You always check it too soon, right?
Okay.
Rather than check it too late. All right.
Lynn
That's
and
the way
Gabby
to go.
have to check recipes.
That's right. So here we go. We've got our add as much or as little of the pastrami and the sauerkraut to each of your bowls, right? Prior to adding the broth, just get it so they're nicely built up just like that. You have a nice base of both things in the bottom of the bowl. Now we'll check our.
I was just looking at the directions.
No, you're fine, Gabby. That's fine. So let's make sure we can got a nice little.
You have to know I've never followed rules in my life, but whatever you do.
And you don't need to season the broth, right? You don't need to add any salt or pepper. No, just the caraway is all you need. It's probably going to be salty enough. Obviously, remember pastrami is pretty salty. You've got salt in the cheese. You got a lot of little components of salt in here. Taste your broth just to make sure it's the way you like it. If you want to, you can add it, but I don't think you'll ever need to in that respect to season the broth. So again, you want to get these so that we're getting a nice, okay. Now we need about 30 seconds, right? Just to give it that extra little bit, right? And it's going to depend on your broiler. It's going to depend on your broiler, right? That's going to be the most important thing. If you know your equipment, that's what's going to help you determine how long.
For somebody like me or Lynn, maybe if we had our bowls with the stuff ready first, then we can watch the cheese.
There we go.
Now we're going to add some of the hot broth over the soup, over the all of that, right? So this by itself, right? That's good. You could just have a nice warming bowl of broth on a cold day. That's a great thing, especially when you get a little bit of. But now, we've got, if I can pick up the pin, we've got our lovely melty cheese. So now we're going to just take those and slide them off. You're just going to nestle it right down in there in the soup.
Oh.
So now it's absorbing. It's going to absorb all that flavor from the broth and all that good stuff. Right? It's going to have all those lovely flavors.
And will the cheese spread?
The cheese will just melt just a little bit
out.
So you can add more or less cheese, whatever you like, to make your soup. And now you just let this sort of work its way in, right? When you come to eat it,
you have a whole meal right there in a bowl.
Just push it right here, and now you have all the flavors of a Reuben together, along with. You don't have to worry about the bread being soggy, right? That's one of my always complaints about a Reuben, right? If they don't toast it right enough, the bread starts to fall apart. Here, it doesn't matter, right? It's okay if the bread's a little soggy because it's absorbing all the flavor of the broth.
So good, and it's perfect for.
And how easy is that? I mean, literally, you can throw this together on a weeknight for dinner. In 15 minutes, you can have this ready to go.
Even I could make it.
I think it's really the long part about it is going to be chopping the onion and dicing the jalapeno, and after that, you're good to go. So, but it's really a fun way to do a Reuben. Gives you just kind of that richness of the broth with all those lovely flavors. So I think you're really going to enjoy this.
Yay for this one.
Yes, I have a question real quick, Chef.
Yes.
If I wanted to like batch it and save it for later, would I like put the sour cream and meat into like a pot and save it all together? Should I like
if you want to save it all together, what I would do is combine the remainder of your sauerkraut and your pastrami with your broth and just refrigerate it that way so it's all together. It'll be a little more difficult to portion when you go to serve it, but if you're just making it for yourself or one other person, it won't be a problem.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Right? Yeah. Just do that and then keep your Thousand Island separate, and then obviously you can make the little crouton toasts.
Cool.
You need.
And you know, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I imagine it could be one of those, soups like chili or stuff that like as a day or so goes by, it gets just that much more.
Very much well. It definitely infuse the soup with the flavor of the pastrami and the sauerkraut.
My stomach is craving it right now.
All right, there you go.
And Chef, and Lynn, we forgot to say, it's stircrazyinthekitchen.com, sign up. And if you go there, the recipes of the week will come up complete with you, and they can go back and watch you on Facebook
They can just see how easy this is, right?
or
You can
Instagram.
literally put
Yeah,
it together.
but the questions that come up are
Sure.
perfect, and you are there all the time in our kitchen.
Well, it feels that way sometimes.
Yeah.
For this week, thanks to Roth Living, and Lynn
Thank
and I
you.
want to thank Ben, and this is the Reuben Soup, and this is crazy, stir crazy, and which I'm going in the kitchen. We'll see you next week. I can hardly wait. Perfect.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Gabby.
Thanks.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.